Hey everyone, this is Dr. Drizzle, and welcome to the National Parks Adventure, Crossing America. Today, we're in Olympic National Park, here because of the National Park Foundation. Thanks so much for having us. And we're also here with Ranger Dean. Ranger Dean, Olympic National Park, this is your playground.
Dr. Drizzle, it is so nice to welcome you to Olympic National Park. Like you said, this is a wonderful place to come and explore and learn and get inspired.
Tell us where we're exactly at.
So we are on Hurricane Ridge right now. We're about 5,200 feet above sea level. We're looking out over the Elwha Valley, and in the distance we can see the Olympic Mountains. The national park is almost 1 million acres.
Wow.
That's about the size of the state of Rhode Island, and there are no roads that go through the national park. So imagine a state with a road that just goes around the edge of the state. That's Olympic National Park. It's a big, beautiful, wild place, and it has been the homeland for people from time immemorial. At Olympic National Park, 8 federally recognized tribes, their ancestral homelands are located within Olympic National Park. Here at Hurricane Ridge, this area is associated with the Clallam people, and the local tribes are the Lower Elwha Clallam, the Jamestown Clallam, and the Port Gamble Clallam tribes.
Well, I can see why you would want to be here, but the next question I have is, how did you come to be here? What is your journey in the national parks?
Well, it started a long time ago. But I started off really as a volunteer with the national parks. I worked at Golden Gate National Recreation Area as a full-time volunteer. And I learned about the mission of the National Park Service there from my park ranger friends. And it was a mission that I felt like I wanted to spend my life sort of working to advance that mission, taking care of places so that people can come and enjoy them and so that they can be protected for the future. And so that spoke to my heart and something that I really thought that I could spend my life doing. And so that started back in 1998, and I've been to lots of parks and in lots of different jobs within the field of interpretation since then.
Can you name a few of them? Our kids have been following national parks for the last 4 or 5 years, so I bet they may recognize some.
Sure. I have been lucky enough to work at Sequoia National Park in California, Kings Canyon National Park in California, Mount Rainier National Park in Washington State, Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming, Grand Canyon National Park in Arizona, and then finally here at Olympic National Park in Washington State.
So we're going to have to get you on the east side of the country sometime. There's a lot of parks over there, but I don't know, this is pretty special. I like this place a lot. So we are in Washington State, and you said we're at Hurricane Ridge in the Olympic National Park. Tell us about this place. What makes it special?
Well, Olympic National Park has been recognized by the United Nations as a biosphere reserve and as a World Heritage Site. It is unique probably for many reasons, but one reason in particular that I'll focus on is the diversity of Olympic National Park. And that diversity is both in terms of the environments that are here and the weather within Olympic National Park, and with the animals and plants that are found here at Olympic National Park. On the other side of the mountains over there, on the west side of Olympic National Park, we have rainforest valleys. So some places there could receive over 200 inches of rain a year. Like 200 inches, thinking about that, is like a 20-story building. So imagine 200 inches of rain a year. And then places over here on the northeast side of the park will only get 15 inches of rain a year. And that's called the rain shadow effect. These mountains are tall enough that the storms, when they come off of the Pacific Ocean, most of the precipitation drops over on the west side. And by the time that that storm gets over the mountains over here, there's a little rain shadow where we only get those 15 inches of rain a year.
We also noticed that while we're talking, there are deer just walking around behind us. What other flora and fauna would you find here at this national park?
Well, Olympic is unique. We have some species that are not found anywhere else in the world. Those are called endemic species. And so they're only found in specific locations. They might have relatives or cousins in other areas, but here in Olympic National Park, we have some endemic species. Up here in the Hurricane Ridge area, we might be able to see the Olympic marmot, which is a marmot species only found in the Olympic Mountains. And so they're rare. You can't find them anywhere else. You have to come to the Olympics to see them. We also have endemic plants, endemic salamander. We have an endemic chipmunk. So we have animals that you can't find anywhere else but here at Olympic National Park. We also are missing some animals that you might think would be here because they're just nearby at places like Mount Rainier National Park in the Cascades, but they're not found here. We don't have pika. You would think we would have pika. This is great pika habitat. We don't have pika. We don't have moose. They're just across the waters, the Puget Sound, over in the mountains and the Cascades, but they're not here. So it's a very unique place. And part of that is a legacy of when Olympic was surrounded by continental glaciers. So we were like an island. So you find a lot of endemic species on islands that are out in the ocean because they're cut off from other places where animals can go back and forth. So the Olympics were like an island surrounded, instead of by a sea, by a glacier, a huge glacier. In fact, that glacier where present day Seattle is, about 15,000 years ago, they think that glacier was 3,000 feet tall. So a 3,000 foot tall, just kind of coming up and crashing into the Olympic Mountains, and a lobe of it going around and forming what is today Puget Sound, and then isolating the Olympics, the tops of the Olympics, from all of the other areas of the continent.
So we know what is beautiful here. We know the peoples that lived here before we've arrived, right? But we also know there may be some challenges that you face as a national park. Can you tell us a little about those?
Yeah, I think our challenges are similar to lots of other national parks. We have a boundary, but our challenges go across our park boundary, right? So we've put a little line on the map and said, this is Olympic National Park, and we're going to protect all of the things inside the national park. But there are so many challenges that go across the boundary and then span across the world. So one of the biggest ones that we face here is climate change. Our mountains are tall, but they're not that tall. And so Mount Olympus is our tallest mountain. It's just under 8,000 feet tall. Right here at Hurricane Ridge, I mentioned, we're at 5,200 feet above sea level. Snow and ice are a big shaper of what present-day Olympic National Park looks like. At 5,200 feet, a change in the wintertime of just a couple of degrees Fahrenheit, warmer, and all of our snow will begin to start to fall as rain. Our glaciers are receding, especially our glaciers that are in the cirques that face south, because our summer temperatures are increasing. Our summers are getting drier. Our winter temperatures are increasing, and sometimes precipitation that in the past would fall as snow is falling as rain. And so shrinking glaciers, shrinking snowpack has effects on vegetation. Some of it might be, if you're a tree trying to get growing in a meadow, less snowpack is actually a good thing for that tree because the growing season is longer.
Right.
But it's not good for the meadow as a whole, because the meadows are formed because the snow lingers so long that the trees can't get established. Shrinking glaciers, I mentioned our summers are pretty dry and they can be warm. And we have salmon that swim up our watersheds, up our rivers to come and spawn before they migrate out to the ocean. That snow and ice is the water source in the summertime. It keeps the waters cold. Salmon need cold, clear water. Shrinking snowpack might impact salmon. So that's one really big issue that we have.
Off camera, we were talking about you had 12 different areas that you're sort of monitoring these
Yes.
salmon. Can you tell us about those?
Yeah, so if you think about Olympic National Park, it's on the Olympic Peninsula, so it's surrounded by water on three sides, the Pacific Ocean, the Strait of Juan de Fuca, and the Hood Canal. And we have these rivers that drain from the interior mountains of the peninsula out to those three different bodies of water. So there's 12 major rivers that drain from the Olympic Mountains and 12 watersheds. And a watershed is basically an area where the water falls, the precipitation falls and flows through that area. That's a watershed. So we have 12 major watersheds. Within each one of those watersheds, we have fish. We have anadromous fish. Now, anadromous is a fancy way of saying a fish that spends part of its life in fresh water and part of its life in salt water. And so they are born in fresh water from eggs. They swim out to the ocean as little tiny fish. They spend their time getting bigger and growing up out in the ocean, and then at the end of their lives, they return back to the freshwater river or stream to spawn and lay their eggs and start the process over again. So in those watersheds, we have different species of salmon. So the Elwha River, we're standing in front of the Elwha River watershed right here, looking out over it. In that watershed, all 5 Pacific salmonid species live in the Elwha watershed. We get multiple runs of some of those fish, so they come up at different times of the year. And so that's all a huge challenge of how do you help those fish survive? How do you manage fishermen in the park? What do you do about changing climate? In the case of the Elwha River, we had 2 dams that were built early in the 1900s that were blocking fish and interrupting the lower Elwha Clallam people's ability to fish for salmon, which is a huge part of their lifeway, a part of their culture. And so the decision was made to remove those dams, and that started in 2011. And then by 2014, both of those dams were gone. It was the largest dam removal so far in the United States history. It is a huge restoration project. And now today, all of those 5 Pacific salmonid species can swim up past those dams and get up into the national park where the habitat is protected, and they can lay their eggs. And hopefully what we'll see as the years go by is we'll see that those salmon runs, that they're resilient, that those numbers are going up, and that the lower Elwha Clallam people can return to fishing for salmon in the river where that's so central to their identity and culture.
Well, I think we found our STEM challenge for our kids. So kids, as you know, we work with the UN Global Goals to try to find ways to solve real-world problems that the national parks face, and then come up with ideas for the rangers to consider, and then take our ideas also back to our own communities. So we want you to get on the Olympic National Park website and learn more about these 12 watershed areas. We want you to read about the peoples that were here. We want you to read about the salmon and how they spawn, how they lay eggs, and that long word that he said that they
Anadromous.
are. Anadromous. We want you to learn that. And we want you to come up with ideas for the park rangers on how we can make sure these salmon stay here, that the waters keep running. Now, climate change is a big deal, and we want you to talk to your teachers about how it is affecting your area and what you can do about it. If you want to build some types of prototypes that you can give to the National Park Rangers to show them maybe a way to keep the waters running more clearly, if you want to come up with a public service announcement to talk about overfishing or the way that you should fish correctly in a national park, I think there's a lot of ideas that our kids can use, because the rangers are smart, but they're like me, they're getting older, and some of the ideas that we have may not fly because we kind of give up after one idea. If we know something didn't work before, we may not do it again. But Ranger Dean, I'm finding that our kids don't give up. They look to find great answers, and if something doesn't work, they try again. We call it failing forward. They want to save the world, and I'm okay with that. I hope you are too.
Oh, absolutely. I think having that growth mindset of learning and looking at failures or things that don't work as opportunities to learn and to grow, I think that's the only way we're going to move forward and the only chance that we have. And I'm really excited to see what your students come up with.
Me too. So what we want you to do is come up with your ideas, share them with your teachers, and then have them share that with us on social media. You can tag me at Dacian92. We also want you to tag the Olympic National Park and tag the National Park Foundation. You can find all of these hashtags and tags running across the bottom of your screen. We can't wait to see what you create and the ways that you're going to make this place a better place for your children and their children. As we talk to our kids all over the country, one of their biggest questions is, how in the world can I be a park ranger? So I know you have some advice for them. So if you can look in that middle camera right there and just give them a little bit of encouragement or advice.
Well, national parks need you, and we need all of you. If you want to work for the national park, don't limit your idea of what you should do to work for the national park. We need all types of people with all types of interests and skills. So the things that are common to all of these different opportunities in the national parks, I think you have to be service-minded. You have to want to see a problem and solve it. You want to have to help people to experience a place. So having that sort of service attitude of, fixing things is a really great skill to develop. Some people have it naturally, and other people, it's something that they can develop over time. Be curious, always learning, not just in school, but at home. If you're interested in history, learn about the history around your area. If you're interested in the natural world, spend time outdoors. You don't have to go to a national park to experience the outdoors. You can experience the outdoors just right outside your home or right outside your school. Even if you're in a big city, there's parks and there's other places that you can go. These little pockets of places can be really fascinating. I remember reading Aldo Leopold was writing about his cabin that he lived in. And there was a place on the prairie where two fences came together. And it was a really small place, but the mowers couldn't get into that area. And in that little area, there were some of the last native plants from the prairies that were found in that little area. So there's places to discover and explore all over. So those would be my advices. Look to serve, continually be curious, constantly be learning. And if you have those three sort of skills or characteristics, you'll go far, if it's in the national park or some other way.
That is wonderful advice. You know, we sometimes say that when your passion intersects your purpose, you found your career for life. And when you told me as a volunteer, you knew that that was your heart's work, I knew that you are our kind of people. We like you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Drizzle. I like you too.
Well, thank you so much for having us here today. Boys and girls, again, we cannot wait to see what you create for the national parks and for your communities. Make sure you share all this with your teachers. On the behalf of the National Park Foundation and Expeditions and Education, this is Dr. Drizzle and Ranger Dean, and we're out of here.
See you in the parks.